We've got an interview guest in front of me right now who you can't see, but you will later, because this will be going out onto YouTube and our podcast channel as well later. Right now, we've got a live chat with a lovely chap named Dave. Hello, David.
Hello, Andy. Good to be with you, mate.
Now, just clarify, because I had a friend who was very specific. Is it Dave or David?
Oh, my mum calls me David, so it always makes me feel like I'm being told off, so you can call me Dave.
That's fine. I knew a guy, I called him Dave. I'm not a Dave, I'm a David. Oh, this is not a great start to a conversation, is it? Don't abbreviate me. My mum didn't, so you can't. Okay. Fine. I mean, fair enough, but there's other ways of saying it. Now, just for my brain, did we meet at the red carpet with Tarn at Step Forward?
Yes, we did. Very, very briefly. And I was so encouraged the fact that you even remembered me, because I think we chatted for about 28 seconds, Andy, but it was very memorable 28 seconds for me. But yeah, there we go.
Have you? Because see, the thing is, we haven't been to Step Forward before. We've never been on a red carpet before. O'Neill Dennis invited us and said, Andy, you've got to come, bring a photographer, come on down, get some interviews and photos. So we did, having never done it before. It was quite nice, one, to see Tarn, because I know her name and her face and she knows me. I knew virtually nobody. Philippa Hannon, Noel Robinson, I recognised them, so I could talk to them. And then obviously Tarn introduced you, but it was quite stressful for us as we're thinking, I don't know who these people are. Where do we stand? What do we do? What's the protocol? We just made it up as we go along, which is what I do well.
It was a lot of fun that night. I really hadn't been to anything like that before, so it was a lot of fun for me. It really was. I'm putting a tuxedo on for the first time as well. It felt like really grown up stuff, right? I
haven't worn a suit since about 1998. So I had to get a black tie. We're on the overland train from the Tube to Hackney to get off. And we're standing up, myself and Nathan, and a guy's sitting down. He just looks at me and smiles and said, "Oh, you look so relaxed in a suit. You must wear one all of the time." Of course, Nathan's then wetting himself thinking, you have no clue. 3 decades virtually without a suit.
That's right.
It's just funny that they thought that. Anyway, I met Noel, interviewed him briefly on the red carpet. I met him at a conference with J John. He's like, oh, you had that green tuxedo suit on, didn't you? Yes. So it did stand out. It was a good fun night, though, getting dressed up.
It really was. It really was. And I was very grateful for that evening. A lot of fun.
Excellent. Right. Now, I mentioned Tarn, who that doesn't necessarily mean everything to everybody, but Home for Good, Safer Families, 2 amazing organisations, one of which Tarn has been running, and they've amalgamated together. So which one do you work for? I know it's becoming one, but where have you come into it from?
Well, we are one now. We've been merged since September 2024. My historic kind of place that I came from was I used to work for Home for Good. And I did that. I did church engagement in the Bath area for around 7 years, actually. And then as the organisations merged together, I then started speaking to the Safe Families piece as well as the Home for Good piece. And now I don't work in the Bath area. I work in Bristol for half my time, and more recently I have moved into Hammersmith and Fulham. So I dance between London and Bristol now. In terms of engagement, but also engage the local communities as well. So it's a lot of fun, lots to get stuck into. It's really good.
For people who aren't quite aware of these 2 organisations that are now working as one, Home for Good, Safer Families, the reason why they've come together is they were similarly sufficient in some of their heart and outlook that they thought we can do better as one. But just before we get into what they're doing, what was it the 2 parts were doing before they amalgamated?
Yeah, so essentially, Safe Families is all about helping and supporting isolated and overwhelmed families through local volunteers, and that's helping them build kind of stable homes and strong community connections. And then Home for Good has always been speaking to the kind of fostering adoption and what we call supported lodgings for older teenagers. Because sadly, when children do come into the care system, we have a real heart and want to champion the church around what it is to create or to kind of give homes to every child that needs one. So that's where the 2 areas have always spoken to, but obviously you can see the synergy that's going to happen between that early intervention piece as well as then meeting the needs of children who do come into the care system later on. So yeah, that's what we're about as an org.
And what was exciting was to see how they've tried to bring, and this is the thing, when you try and bring two organizations together, no matter what you do, there's going to be some great stuff and some less, clunky stuff. But I loved the fact that the two leaders of both organizations got on a tandem bike and cycled together. Because I just thought, of all the ways of trying to demonstrate working together, that's probably one of the greatest challenges. And what a picture of we're going to work together.
Oh, absolutely. And they're two incredible leaders. And I'm not just saying that because they're my boss. To actually see them both bring very different and unique skill sets, but bring it together, champion the church, champion believers, and people who want to come around us as an organization up and down the land. We're being led in the most extraordinary ways. So it's an exciting place to work and be. And we're really excited about where the church is also stepping up into these spaces and how we might, move forward into the future to support as many families and children as possible.
Let's go back a little bit in time, because where does life and faith fit? How did you end up working for this organization? You said it amalgamated in 24. How far back do you go with this organization as it is now?
Well, I mean, I saw Home for Good come on the horizon not long after it kind of came about through its genesis. And it was particularly interesting to me, Andy, because at the time that it came about with a chap called Krish Kandiah, who set it up, I was a foster carer at the time. So I had very much a heart for what it looked like to open the home for kind of radical hospitality, as it were, as I used to call it at the time. And really, what I was interested in was not only what would it look like to come alongside a young person who really, really needed love and support and family, but also increasingly was loving the idea of what it would look like for a church to do that well as well. And I kind of had all these ideas floating around in my head, and I was watching my church come around, particularly our first young lady who lived with us, a lady called Lisa, who now is in her 20s, is still in contact with her. She's incredible. But then it was kind of almost all those ideas that were floating around in my head were then solidified in this organization. And I thought, wow, they're kind of headed in the same way that I think I am. So for me, it was very much a natural draw as to how I could join that org and how I could kind of get involved in the mission and venture of it. So yeah, that's kind of where I came from on it.
I mean, foster care, I've met a few folk across the years, some who it was like they became a full-time foster carers, more right. Emergency, really short-term stuff. Lovely couple. And when they said, we're going to do this full-time, we're going to move out into the middle of nowhere, the kids can make as much noise as they need to. And I just thought, what a perfect couple. They were absolutely the kind of people that you want doing that immediate, short, sharp. They've got to have a bed for the night or the week or whatever. And that's what they would do. So I've met a few folk along the way. And it always amazes me that there are people who are so willing to do that. I know we chatted to Neil from Wales, from your organisation, who talks about his passion and his heart and how many foster children there are against how many churches. And I think my statistic in my head was if every church helped 2 families, there would be no children in foster care. Is that roughly right? Have I misremembered?
Well, yeah, the original number, Andy, was the fact that actually there were around 50,000 children in the UK who needed loving homes, and there were 50,000 churches. So the initial kind of numbers were around that. But the number does go up every year. The amount of children that need homes is going up increasingly across the UK. We've got 100,000 kids in the care system at the moment. And so we do need to be far more creative, and we need to be thinking about how we can creatively work inside the fostering space, as well as the adoption and, supported lodging space as well. But we have a huge heart to encourage people and to think about, what space could they open up so that kids could get the home that they need. Yeah.
I want to come back to your route into foster care, and then we'll come back to Home for Good, Safer Families. But let's go back even further in time for you. Where does faith fit in your life that it became something, I guess, a bit more than just a bit of interest?
Yeah, so I grew up in a church in kind of South London, just on the border of Surrey and London. And to be honest, Andy, for the first good few years of my life, I wasn't buying any of it. I thought it was somebody else's story. And then when I was 15, I went to an event up in London, and it was at the Royal Albert Hall with the Methodist Association of Youth Clubs. And this guy kind of gave a gospel message, and I think he encouraged people to pray. And to my shame, I still can't remember what the guy asked us to pray for. All I remember was saying to God, if you're real, you're going to have to show me. And a very cheeky prayer. And anyway, God was very gracious inside that moment, and it was very powerful because he said to me, "You are my son, and I love you." And that was the start of my fostering journey, but my faith journey at 15, and I kind of have grown and pushed into God ever since that point. And what I find fascinating, Andy, is that sometimes I think God can just give you a sentence about something, and actually for the rest of your faith journey, you can grow into it. So I just find it really interesting that the whole idea of family and feeling like you have identity in a father figure, and all of those things that God spoke to me when I was 15, actually when I then headed into I did youth work for a few years, and then into the fostering space, and particularly having a heart for young people and children who really needed that kind of sense of identity. I think God started with me first, and I just find that fascinating as to how God plays things out in life. But yeah, 15 when I came to faith, and I've been trying to, as best as I can, been following him ever since.
I do a few interviews, and one of the things that I love is seeing how where people start from in their faith so frequently, it's almost like God comes full circle, and they can go into all sorts of the good things, not away from God stuff, but just they can go and have a career and a life and get a job and stuff. But then God kind of brings back, uses all this amazing stuff that they've done and thought, well, what's that got to do with anything? And then all of a sudden God's using it. I've had that myself. I was trucking for over 20 years. Now I do loads of driving. Hey, it's not a problem. I got a 4-hour drive. Oh, that's very far. You must be so tired. Not at all. I used to do 10 hours a day.
I'm good at it.
So, it's funny how God takes those things that we think, well, that's not got any use for the gospel. Yeah. Do you know what? Kind of does.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Nothing's wasted, right?
No, nothing. And this is what I love about my knowledge and my honor and privilege, just to talk to people and get their stories, and just hearing so many people saying exactly what you said in several hundred ways of how God takes who we are. Let's go on a bit further. So 15, you came to faith. You've done some youth work and stuff. Where did you actually enter into foster care then? How many years ago was this when you first started fostering?
So this was back in started throwing the idea around in around 2008, 2009, and then eventually became a foster care in 2010, I think it was. And it was, I don't know if you remember, but back when there was that huge crash in the world. Remember when all the money fell out the world and
lost my business? Yep, I remember that.
Oh, bless you. Okay, yeah. I mean, it was an incredibly tricky time, wasn't it? And there was a lot of reflection. I guess probably the last thing that was like that was lockdown, right? We all kind of looked at our lives again and said, "Where am I headed? What do I want to do?" And certainly at that point, I was in a very similar position, and God had been speaking to me. I mean, I've done a bunch of stuff in my career, but when I was a youth worker at my local church, I was in charge of a big team, 50, 60 volunteers, I think it was at the time, in various capacities. And at the time, maybe 150, 200 children that were coming into various parts of church life, and incredibly blessed. But there was something in that God just kept saying, what would it look like for the one? What would it look like for that one kid who... Oh, sorry, I get a bit emotional with this stuff, Andy. What would it look like for them to find the love that they need, to really experience the very intentional life what would it look like for you to come around them? And to be honest, at the beginning, I didn't really know the answer to that. I didn't know where that was really coming from. There was something in there, and then I couldn't walk over verses like look after the widow and the orphan in their distress, which normally, James 1:20 says, you just, okay, and then you just carry on to whatever's next. But I just, God sets the lonely in families. Oh, wait. Like, what does that mean to me? Like, I kept being brought back to these verses, and I kind of kept circling back. So then when that crash happened, and I started looking at life again and thinking about what the next steps would look like, that's when it became kind of quite clear that God was saying something around moving away from doing larger work, which of course is incredibly valid and there's nothing wrong with it and it's absolutely needed. But it was a personal call as to what it would look like to journey with just maybe one or a few children or young people over in that next season of life. So that's kind of where I started to come from on it. Yeah.
I wanted to delve a bit into being a foster carer because I think there are loads of perceptions, there are loads of thoughts. The night before your very first child came to you,
yes.
Were you full of happiness and peace of, hey, this is all going to be good? Or was there some nervousness about what have we just decided to do?
Oh, well, I mean, to be honest, once you actually go to a foster panel and you are approved as a foster carer, your phone takes, like, your normal home phone takes on like a bat phone feel to it. Like, like when you're going to pick it up and you're like, anything could happen. A whole adventure could start off the back of this, this next phone call, and you don't know what it's going to look like. And, we were approved at the time for a whole bunch of different placements. We could do emergency care, short-term care, all the way through to long-term care. So actually what we were approved for, it really could look very, very different depending on what the need was and the phone call was. Now, in our particular instance, when the phone call did come, it was for a long-term placement. Ultimately, that was the big, the main thing that was happening for us. So there was a bit more of a run up to it, so we had a few introductory meetings, a few kind of, is this going to work for this young person, this Lisa who I was talking about? Is it going to work for us as well? And so, we had to figure out what that looked like. It needed a bit more of an introduction. But you're right, there's a trepidation. What's it going to be like? How's it going to affect things? I've got 2 birth children as well. What's it going to be like for them? There's a whole load in there that you could, you could just think it over. And there's 100 reasons to say no as well, right? There really is. But at the same time, you can't get away from those verses, and you can't get away from the fact that if you've been prompted by God. So there's a bit of a leap of faith to it, Andy. You actually have to kind of say, look, I think this mission and the vision of what God has put in my heart, and the fact that there is such a need in our country, for kids who need those loving homes. What are you going to do about it? And certainly I couldn't roll over and just ignore that anymore. So yeah, there was a level of trepidation. There was a nervousness. There was a shape to it where I thought, I haven't got all this figured out, but none of it was big enough that I could say no to it. So that's where the adventure started.
So your very first foster child was called Lisa. How many more foster children you've had since then?
So, I mean, in and around Lisa lived with us for about 3.5 years out of those 10. And we had a few kind of short-term, what we call like short breaks and things like that for other carers who maybe were on holiday or needed a break or whatever. So we'd have a few children like that. For that kind of period of time, you see what I mean? Or for a week, maybe, stuff like that. But primarily, it was 2 long-term placements, one of 3.5 years and one of about 4.5 years. Yeah, and that's kind of how it made up that time.
The fact that there's more than one, I mean, it doesn't matter what the scenario is, there's more than one child that you've cared for, which tells me all that I need to know. That 1, you're the right person doing the right thing at the right time, and 2, it's obviously worthwhile you doing it because I've got three children. It's hard work raising a child. I don't care who you are, how many children you've got, it is hard work raising children. It's really hard work. You give everything you have and then more. And like you said, you had 2 birth children. You're adding into the mix someone from outside the home. How did your birth children, what age were they, and how did they manage and handle all this?
Yeah, well, when we started, they were my son, who's Noah. He was 4 years old. He's a great big thing now. He's 19, but at the time he was 4 years old, and my daughter Hope was 18 months old. So they were very young. And even that, now I look back and I'm like, what were you doing? But actually, again, just that sense of the fact that God was in it, was good. First of all, I think when your children are that old, they actually look at you and they're like, look, if it's cool with you, it's cool with us. There's something about that. They just have this huge heart. But the other thing that I learned, and maybe I wasn't necessarily expecting this, Andy, is when you've got kids who have grown up in a loving, safe environment, they become huge agents of therapeutic change for kids who are coming into your space as well. They taught kids who were inside our house what it was to feel safe. They taught them the fact that actually they could play in safe spaces where they knew there weren't going to be any assailants or there wasn't going to be any issues, going on. They taught them what it was to come to the dinner table and know that there was going to be a meal again. They would act as that kind of regulation, around kids who maybe who had experienced the worst kind of neglect or, abuse inside other situations. So because they don't come with any of those adult questions, because they don't come with any forms to fill out, because they don't, do you know what I mean? They don't come with any of that baggage, which so often children in care or in the care system, when they're experiencing adults, they have their back up because they're so worried about, what's going to happen or what what these adults are going to do, or, the kind of, social work, all that kind of stuff. Kids don't bring any of that baggage. They just don't bring any of it. And so actually we saw Noah and Hope have the most incredible effect on children that were in our care. And they didn't even mean to do it. They just were being themselves. And I think that's just incredible. And it's interesting now, now they're in their late teens as well. Their perception and understanding of what it is for the fact that kids don't have the same background as them. They have a very empathic heart. They have a very understanding kind of posture towards life because they haven't been sheltered from it. They've seen that stuff up close, and they know that actually they've brought something to the table with it. So I'm incredibly proud of the pair of them. They're most incredible people. Yeah.
I love how you talked about them regulating quite naturally without being on purpose.
Right.
18 months, 4 years, I suppose 18 months lesser, but 4 years old, they're probably at least beginning to form who they are and how do they fit into the home much more clearly. So they're at that age when, that's yeah, I'm not surprised when we were in children's ministry. Sometimes folk would say, "Can we come around and see our children can spend some time with your children?" Because they're like they behave and they're like polite, and could they spend some time with them? And we never did anything special. We just had 3 amazing lads. We were really blessed with them. But they would, in a similar way, we'd have parents saying, "Can we just have our children spend some time with us?" Because they really love life. They got a zest for life. And they also know how to engage with people and converse. And you've just been chatting to Stephen, my oldest son. And it's one of those things where we try to get them to interact with other human beings. We go into supermarkets and you can see the staff they're talking to me. These children, because it was a big part, it was important for me. I've worked in retail. I know what it's like to be ignored when you're on the till. They're doing their job. So in the same way, I can understand some of that from a very different perspective. But that's what children do. They, like you said, they don't have forms to fill out of, okay, what's your name? Where you're from? What's your ethnicity? What's your parent? Are you football or rugby or netball? They don't care. They really don't, in a wonderfully beautiful, perfectly innocent way.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they don't bring any of that kind of nonsense to the table, as it were, they're regulated in themselves. So they just naturally communicate that calmness. And they want to share, here's my toys, here's my TV, do you want to play Xbox, whatever it is whatever, that's just, they just know how to do it. They flex and move with it. And, and I think God uses kids in the most incredible ways to help other children maybe who really struggle. Yeah.
I know I went through some of these questions with Neil from Wales a while back, but I think it's worth to go again because I know that people will have their thoughts on adoption and fostering. And I guess perhaps because we've got a global audience, maybe that means different things in different places. But with fostering, we're talking about not, I suppose, a contract mum and dad. It's a slightly different relationship. How would you explain fostering in the UK? Just, I guess, for clarity for others listening.
Yeah, so like I said, there's all kinds of different kinds of fostering. And, it goes from emergency care to short breaks through to long-term care, through to mother and baby placements, and a whole bunch of different ones in between. And, you can read up about that on the Home for Good website. But essentially, the main thing, the main difference about fostering is the fact that actually the state is the corporate parent for the children because they're in the care system, and the foster carers are the kind of custodians who are working alongside the state to look after those children through to the point where they can then flourish by themselves as adults. Yeah.
Just dealing with some of the, I guess, common issues that I can create in my own mind that could be an obstacle. What happens if we don't like the child? There's one for you. How do you help people who are thinking about this, thinking, what if we don't like them? What if they don't like us? How do you overcome that one?
Oh wow! Yeah, you don't like them. just thinking about the times where I haven't liked my own children, Andy, but we love them through it anyway. Look, it's this isn't about liking them. I think this ultimately is, yes, chemistry of course helps, but we are talking about children who often have had the hardest and the cruelest starts to life in terms of their experiences. So this is not about that. This is about helping them navigate and keeping them safe through to the point where they're not only having a new worldview, which is being put together for them, that they're realizing that not every adult is unsafe. They're learning from dads about how to demonstrate and be a good man. They're learning from women as to what it would look like to mother well or to be a good sister or, whatever it is. All the way through to how they're going to navigate the adult world, how they're going to navigate, life and relationships and, the practicalities of life, all of those things. This is about standing in the gap and being the most incredible person to these kids so that they can thrive and get the life that they always deserved, Andy. The fact that they were born inside a particular situation was no fault of their own, or often their parents, so often parents have been through cycles themselves of neglect or issues. This is about trying to help the kid in front of us get the best life that they can. And so often, I'm just thinking, and I would share this with permission, there were days, Andy, where Lisa was really hard to like. But love isn't that. Love is a choice. Love is about turning up and sometimes wiping the metaphorical, if not physical, blood away from your nose and saying, we're going to do this again. And actually, I'm a firm believer that love wins. You just keep going, and as best as you can with the time that you've got, with the children that are in your care, you do the business of God. You just keep turning up the way He does for us. And I'm absolutely convinced that is eternal work, that is kingdom stuff, and that is kingdom relational stuff. So I think this is an incredible challenge that we should be bringing with all our might and gusto as a clarion call to the church. And there's lots to be done, mate. There is.
I love what you were saying about love, because in the church, I love one of the things, using the wrong word here, but when I'm thinking about how we get on with folk, within the Christian community, and I like the fact the Bible says not like each other. It says to love each other. Because if it only said, it was a call, just like each other, we wouldn't ever see past the fact that person's singing out a tune in front of us and seriously, what's wrong with your perfume? And can't you sit down? All those things that rile us up. But I don't think God cares if we like people much at all, probably, because actually we're called to love, which is exactly what you were just saying. What a perfect example with your own fostering situation and what you went through of how we should be with one another in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's fascinating for me as well, in one of the greatest days of my life was even though Lisa had to leave our care after 3.5 years because it was becoming unsafe around my two birth children, a year later she came back into our lives, Andy. She actually asked to come back to church after she bounced around a whole bunch of foster homes. And she asked to come back to church because she'd forged such wonderful relationships there. And so she came back, and I don't think we missed her for a week every time, even though she wasn't living with us. She was living with another set of foster carers. But here's what's fascinating. I didn't know about it, but she went to her old youth worker and she said, I think this God is for me. And I think, sorry, I still get a bit emotional. I think this God is for me and I want to give my life to Him. And so she asked to be baptized. And when she was baptized, which I was a mess for, by the way, as you can imagine. But, she spoke to the room and she said, it's because you didn't judge me. It's because you fed me. It's because you became an overnight carer and journeyed with me, And so she spoke to these different types of love around the room. And really what she was speaking to was the church doing its thing. It was the church doing its best version of itself. And so it wasn't just, Dave Kingswood and his family. It was actually speaking to a much wider thing of what was going on, and the fact that the church has got so much to speak into inside that space. So even when we were on our knees, other people were saying, do you know what? We'll drop round a meal. We'll become an overnight carer. We'll take her out for the afternoon so you can have a kip, whatever it is. Because actually, that's what it is, isn't it? A village brings up a child. And I think that is where the love of God can work so well through a community of believers. And certainly that was my experience. And I know that for Lisa, that is still a huge part of her journey, about the fact that, that had such a profound effect on her life. When she first moved in with us, she honestly couldn't work out how I had 150 people on the payroll. Like she honestly thought, she was like, there's no way these people could be interested in me for free. And so you can imagine what it looked like to fall in love for her with the idea of not only being loved, but being celebrated. It has it has an incredible effect, mate. It really does. And I think, church has got a lot we can do inside this space, a lot of who we can be, not only to the kids that come into our care, but also to the people who choose to do this stuff directly, for the families, for the carers who turn up and say, I want to do this. Who can we be to them? What part can we play? What does love look like to those people? And like you say, it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. This is the life that we chose. This is what we do. So, yeah.
I like that a lot. I will even go as far as to say I love that. Now, if folk are listening, because it's worth going there, and I'm thinking, I had thought about it, but this bit scares me, or how do we even get into that? Will I have, social workers in my house? Like, are they going to live there? I'm going to lose all my privacy. I'm just trying to think of some sort of the stereotypical, perhaps, thoughts of what could be. How do you talk about that? Because clearly they're going to be involved in your life. So you kind of have to expect that and be okay with that. But what is it like being a foster carer in terms of your interaction with the state? As you put it, you're helping the state out because you're caring for these children on their behalf. But what is the interaction like? How did you find that?
Yeah, you are surrounded by a network of professionals. You've got people who are, talking to you from an education point of view. You're talking to social workers. The young people have got their own social workers. You might have therapeutic intervention. There could be all kinds of people that are inside your professional network, all trying to add value, at various points. And, it's a thing. Like, let's not call it anything different. You're going to have more conversations with more people than probably you've had in a whole other bunch of spheres inside your life. But the thing to remember is that everyone is trying to champion the needs of you and the children. Ultimately, that's what this thing is about. We're trying to do the best that we can to make sure that the children and young people can thrive. And so, this is the life that we choose. If you choose to be a foster carer, this is something that we sign up to. And, is it different to most ways of life? Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. Is it a little bit, does it happen inside your house? Yeah. Yeah, it does. Do you get to go home? No, you don't. This is how it happens. But to be involved in the journey of what it is to bring and help a young person get to the place where they were always meant to be, that they were meant to thrive, to be the person who champions and yells at the back of the school, assembly, and goes, hey, you're there and you're turning up for them. It's the most incredible life, Andy. It's the most incredible thing to do. And so I would really encourage and champion anyone who's thinking about it to call us at Home for Good, to sign up. We've got a bunch of really cool resources as well that can assist your church, as well as we would encourage people to come on something called the Foundations course as well, so that we kind of walk you through not only theologically, but we would also walk you through the practical elements as to what it means to foster and to adopt and to provide supported lodgings, and answer all the questions that you've got. It's a free course. You can sign up online on homeforgood.org.uk. We would love to journey with anyone who would be thinking about this thing. And hey, look, lots of people take a long time before they actually pull the trigger on things like fostering. But if you feel that God is saying something about this stuff, don't say no. Just turn up, find out, inquire, talk about it. We'll put you in touch with other people who have done it and whatever it is. You never know. You never know who you could be and what your family could be and what your situation could be for a young person who so desperately needs it. So we would love to hear from you. Yeah.
Permit me to go a little bit of gospel heavy, which I wouldn't normally do. I'm really conscious that the heart of the Christian faith is that Jesus came down. He was God. He became man. He journeyed physically on earth. He went to the cross. And the whole point of that is he died for the sins that we did, even when we hated him. He died. He went to hell. And then he came back, having defeated hell. That's kind of the whole point of the gospel. And then we get to say yes to Jesus. But the thing is, he says, do you want to come to heaven? I mean, he's inviting all of us. And some of us will say yes, some of us will say no. But when you're talking about fostering, we're sort of doing a piece of that kind of approach of saying, hey, look, Jesus loved us. He's choosing us. Do you know, I'm choosing you. The moment you say to somebody who's been rejected by life, I choose to help you. I choose to put you in my life because I want to support you, because I care about you, which is essentially what Jesus, well, exactly what Jesus is doing with us. That's the thing that's going to change lives. A friend of mine, he's probably in his 70s now, from years ago. He was, his parents had abandoned him. So we're going back, a long time ago. And he was in foster care, various types of different situation. And when he got to 16, he was kicked out the door, off you go. And that was it. It only went to 16, off you go. He went into the Navy and RAF and different things to try and find a life for himself. A Jewish couple took him in who took pity on this kid who had no way of preparing for himself in life. We are thankfully very, very far on from that place, I would like to hope. But the bit I wanted to, suppose, ask you is, you sort of gone there a little bit. How do Home for Good and Safer Families, how are you helping and equipping? I know you've explained some of that, but how do you actually support parents through the journey to consider it? And then when they've actually said, yes, I'm going to be that, we'd love to think their local church is going to support them. Clearly, there's various elements of social workers and so on to support the foster caring situation. But where do you as an organisation then continue to support? How does that sort of fit into the jigsaw puzzle?
Yeah, well, I think, just kind of going upstream a little bit, when I talk about when we talk about the safe family side of things, it makes so much more sense to help families before the wheels come off for them. If actually families have been identified by the local authority as to they're struggling, they're often in overwhelm, they're feeling isolated, surely we as believers should be coming around those families, as volunteers and helping people before things get too bad. It can have such a profound effect, and it's the intelligent move. So we put a lot of our time and energy into really challenging the church into saying, who could you be to local families who are struggling, who you may not even know about, but are being referred to us? We would love to help you, come alongside them. And we provide really good scaffolding around that. We provide all the help with safeguarding. We give help with boundaries around that. Really, really hold it well, even down to the matching of volunteers to the families that are in need. So we try and work really intelligently around that, and we do a great job, and we see the most amazing effects that's happening inside that. And like I said, I've been working in Bristol and in a couple of the boroughs in London as well. But just having recent statistics that have come out of Bristol, we are seeing huge de-escalations that are happening in Bristol families that are experiencing those incredible volunteers who are coming alongside those families, and then actually not only are they de-escalating, but sometimes completely going off the radar of the local authority having to be involved. So it makes so much more sense, doesn't it, to keep families together, and so that's what we're really passionate about when it comes to the safe families kind of work. But when it, like I said, if we move into the Home for Good space as well, like I've already mentioned, we've got the Foundations course. We also provide church leaders with lots of really helpful information around things like Father's Day, Mother's Day. Those really awful services that we always tend to get really wrong because we kind of speak to 2.4 kids and, oh no, have we alienated these people over there, or we've got such intelligence and wisdom, from a great cloud of people who help us put those resources together in really good quality stuff as well. We've got small group resources so that we can encourage people into thinking around what it looks like to make room for themselves, making our tent pegs wider and our tents larger so that people can be invited into those spaces. And equally, we have peer support groups as well up and down the land, which people can join, where foster adoptive families, they can get together, kinship families, can get together, and they can pray together, they can support one another, they can be loved. We can give advice, through our inquiry line and our care line to anyone who's got questions around fostering and adoption as well. So our heart is always to say, we want to walk with you at every step of this. We don't want anyone to feel like they're doing this stuff by themselves. And we want to be able to bring kind of wisdom and intelligence into every part of it, whether you're inside a church setting and we want to create that culture that comes around a family, through to people who choose to do this and actually have got all the questions that they need to ask. How can we help you on that journey as well? So that ultimately when people do come into the land and they end up with their bat phone, they feel as prepped as they can be. And then when that phone does go, actually, we're going to be there afterwards as well. And that's our heart for everyone that chooses to do this. With no one in anything that we're trying to do should feel alone or abandoned. We want to walk with everyone through this.
Fab. Dave, thank you. It's been a pleasure just to hear some of your heart, your story. Obviously, some of the story of Home for Good, Safer Families. Where do people come? What's the websites that people need to get in their heads?
Yeah, so on the volunteering side of things, do look at safefamilies.uk. And if you'd like to understand a little bit more about the fostering, adoption and supported lodging side, as well as any of our advocacy work, please do have a look at homeforgood.org.uk. And either of those websites, you'll see more about our particular missions, but also how we hold together as one organisation as well.
Dave, thank you. We chose some music just before we started talking. You mentioned a very few things. I ended up with Seal, which was sort of along the lines of one of the bands that you like at the moment. So we're going to go out with that in just a moment. But thank you for your time. It's been a real pleasure and a joy just to find out some of your heart, some of why you do what you do. If we could get a nice little soundbite, why should people foster?
Why should people foster? Because there are children up and down this land who need loving homes, and this is the heart of God. Consider what it would look like for you to open your home, radical hospitality, so that children and young people can thrive.
Dave, thank you.
Did you know that at Pure 24/7 Radio we also offer advertising? Advertising really does work. Let's face it, you're listening to this. Want to know more? Well, just go to pure247radio.org, pure247radio.org/advertising, and you can get everything you want and more there.